Welcome to another episode of Candid, where we have real talks with real people. I'm your host, Shanae, and I'm here with my co-host, Anise. Last week, we talked about making small changes in legislation in order to create a bigger change across the Bahamas. This week, we will look shortly at local news that occurred during the week, and then we're going to speak with our guest speakers, Sydney Sinclair, Damani Sinclair, and Latrey Johnson.
Well, recently in the country, there has been an outbreak of violence and domestic abuse cases. A 4-year-old little girl, Bella, was murdered last week by her mother's boyfriend, and it sparked outrage in local communities.
And it brought up a lot of bad memories for Bahamians as they remember the gruesome murders of children that occurred over the last few decades, such as 11-year-old Marco Archer, who was brutally murdered, and the victims of Cordell Farrington, a serial killer who committed a series of crimes in Grand Bahama in the early 2000s. Many Bahamians called on the new administration to officially implement and use the Marco Alert system and also to create a sex registry. This system has been in the works for literally a decade, and it's supposed to launch November 29th this year. And it had its final test run with Alive this week. And it's been a long time coming. And I hope that it stays on track and can be rolled out in a timely fashion. So shortly after the attack on Bella, a video was circulated on social media with a brutal attack on a young woman. It showed the gruesome tale as the woman was dragged out of a car by a man. She's beaten, stabbed, and he drives off, turns around, and is speeding and rolls her over, and in the process, almost knocked down bystanders as well. Apparently, this wasn't the first incident, but the woman was rushed to the hospital where she was labeled as in critical condition, and the young man was arrested. And she was a mother of three. The Bahamas Christian Council actually made a statement regarding this issue, and they pleaded with abusers to walk away from the tense and heated moments as we continue to find our footing from one crisis after another crisis. Our society is scorched with the escalating acts of domestic violence in our nation. They also said that it was angry at this brutal act of violence against women and a child, and to see this as a sign of depravity that humanity has sunk in recent time. We agreed that our nation is seemingly spiraling out of control at such an alarming rate in which these incidents have been occurring. So I found it interesting. I mean, I guess it's good on their part that they're speaking out against domestic violence.
I feel that it's interesting that everyone is acting as though it's something that hasn't been happening for the longest time. I feel that a lot of the times these things are swept under the rug. It's been happening forever. The act that happened, it was horrible, but I wanted to talk about the information that's been spread on social media. As a small society, a lot of information is spread very quickly, and it's not just the true stuff, it's a lot of false information, because a lot of the times people put their stereotypical or their salty biased opinions into it. And a lot of people were saying that she may go back to him if she recovers and stuff like that. And I think that people don't realize that being abused is difficult. It works on your mental health, and it's a mental issue. And I think as a whole, we don't focus on mental issues. A lot of the times when people speak up in these type of situations, others, they don't take it seriously, or they say things that they don't realize has a very strong effect on people. Abuse is something that messes with the way you think about yourself, the way you think about just everything in general. And I think that we need to work on, one, what we say, because a lot of our words have power over individuals, whether they're mentally unstable or not. And two, we need to work on mental health. I feel like we're working towards it, because they did change the name of the ministry to
They changed it to the Ministry of Health and Wellness.
yeah, and I think hopefully they can enact something soon that can help that. And I think that we need several campaigns to fix the way that we look at these types of issues, because a lot of people are scared to speak up, not because of them being afraid of their abusers, but because of they're afraid of the way that people will react to it. And that's not okay at all. I feel that as a nation, we come together for certain things. We come together for Junkanoo. We come together for Christmas. We know how to come together. We come together for sports, but we don't come together when it comes to mental health. If the brain is an organ, why can't we treat it like every other part of our body? I don't understand that. I just say all that to say that I think that we need to be mindful of our words, because you never know what someone is going through and how influential what you say is.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And even with the murder of the little girl, the 4-year-old girl Bella, it was spreading on social media that she was raped. So I mean, it was the Minister of National Security. He came out and he said, well, that was false, and that
Yeah.
she actually died of blood and force trauma. But after that, a lot of a lot of Bahamians went on Facebook and they began sharing their sexual assault stories. And this man, I don't remember his name, but it was like one of those posts, those pages, and he basically was victim blaming people, like mostly people were children. He was victim blaming them and basically saying that, oh, why you didn't speak up so we could put these people in jail, and he was basically blaming them. And I thought that was very interesting because I'm like, these are little kids. Most of them were children when these acts occurred. How do you expect a 9-year-old, a 10-year-old, a 15-year-old to even comprehend what is going on with them? They're still kids. And most of the time, people don't take children seriously. They rather save face. They rather protect that family member than to protect the child. And this is something that is embedded in our culture. And a lot of Bahamians don't realize that. And it's not that easy sometimes to just tell. And even if you do tell, sometimes nothing happened.
And sometimes it's not even just like the kids, even people who are older and they understand what happened. Like I said, like being abused, it changes your mental state. It changes the way you think about yourself and the way you think about others. You never know what is happening at home. You don't know if their abuser is paying for their life or if their abuser has some type of connection to someone who is higher up, who can make it go disappear. Like, it's not just speaking up about your abuse, it's the ramifications that come after, because people don't realize like it can ruin your life, really. So it's not as easy as just speaking up, especially as women, because abuse isn't just blatant. There's different levels of it. And as a woman, we've all experienced some type of it, even just catcalling and seeking at people and flirting with people who are obviously so uncomfortable and threatened by it. As a woman, we're never going to be as strong as another man, or not even just women. Men experience it as well. And I think, like I was saying, it's just a whole stigma that we all have to fix our mindsets about.
Yeah, definitely. It's a stigma. And in the age of social media, a lot of conversations occur there. Facebook being a very popular source for discussions like this. And I'm in a few Bahamian groups, and seeing the conversation and the dialogue among people is interesting.
A lot of conversations happen on Facebook, right? And for instance, there was this post that was basically saying that a man had offered a woman a ride and she declined or whatever, and the man made a joke and he was like, "Oh, well, let her walk in the hot sun then." And it was just like, you may be a good man, but we don't know you, and we don't know that you're a good man. Because how many times women are in fear for their lives, as simple as rejecting someone, you could be hurt, and people don't understand that, and it's just frustrating because it's just like, if you have not lived the experience, I think that you should try to understand where some people are coming from. As simple as someone asking for your number and you give it to them, or you give somebody else number because you're afraid to tell them no because you don't know what's going to happen. That's a real thing, even in the Bahamas. So I definitely think we need to change our mindset on that. So next I will be talking about was hirees receiving a full salary, but they're at home. And prior to the election, the former administration had done a hiring exercise in the public sector, and a few of them were not able to be placed. It's about 40 individuals. So Minister of State for Public Service, the Honorable Pia Glover-Rowe, said that it's become customary for a new administration to review what has happened, especially in the last weeks or months prior to them coming into office. And she said that, "I will tell you that there are persons that are hired in the last 8 weeks and are still at home. They're being paid, but we have nowhere to put them. That is why we have to have an audit to ensure that we are filling the gaps and building capacity where it's necessary, and not just bringing people in to have a job. We can't just hire and not know where to put people. And we have to make sure that we're placing people in positions that are available and necessary to move the public service forward. And the audit is expected to be completed in June or July of 2022. And
I don't understand how that happened. How would you be paying someone if they never work?
yeah, I don't understand. It seems as though it was an oversight. And we know
But how do you
sometimes
overlook that?
mhm,
That's ridiculous.
you notice they pay 40 salaries and they could not give an estimate of how much money was being paid to these 40 individuals. But even if it's just $20,000, that is a lot of money for a country that's billions of dollars in debt. Like as you said, I don't understand how we could just be paying out money like this and their home.
And that's why a lot of people have this stigmatism, like this negative feeling towards a lot of government workers. And a lot of the times those jobs are given to family members and friends. And well, hopefully they're able to fix it in a timely manner.
Yeah, I hope so too. So Attorney General Ryan Pinder said that employers have 12 weeks to make furloughed employees redundant and pay them severance pay or bring them back to work. And this is in accordance with the Employment Act. So during the pandemic, I don't know if anyone remembers it. I don't know if you remember, Nice. The former administration implemented a special order that suspended a provision of the Employment Acts. So basically, redundancy wasn't a thing after a lengthy period of layoffs. So this was put in place, as the former administration said, to protect the economic viability of businesses during the state of emergency. And this angered a lot of people, and many felt that it was a bailout for major corporations while Bahamians were left to suffer. And because this was implemented from the beginning of the pandemic, which was March 2020, many workers were laid off, but their statuses were not automatically considered redundant, and employers had no obligation to pay them. So the office of the Prime Minister, Press Secretary Clint Watson, he was unable to actually provide an estimate for the number of people still furloughed in the Bahamas, but the president of the Bahamas Hotel Catering and Allied Workers Union said that about 50% of the union membership remains furloughed, which is a lot. And also, the Minister of Labor and Immigration, Honorable Keith Bell, told The Guardian last month that unemployment was still as high as 30%, even with the reopening of the country. And I think this is very important. The country, we're in a bad state, basically. And I don't know all the logistics of that, but I thought it was kind of a stab at Bahamians, or even just workers in general, to say that you're not obligated to pay them anything, stuff that is outlined in the law. Even if they had said, okay, you pay them 25%, 30%, but a lot of people were hurting. And I felt as though that was kind of poor on their end.
It was poor taste to do that. I think it was thinking about, I wouldn't say they're the 1%, but like a lot of people use the 1% name for people who are richer, like in the States, but I'm not sure what it's called over here, but just caring for the richer when there was a poor that was suffering. In that situation, the poor person was left worse off. And ethically, that doesn't make sense. Like, you're supposed to be caring for those who can't afford it. I'm sure that the businesses that would have to pay these people out, they could have found loans to support themselves in comparison to the little person who was trying to make $200 a week. And a lot of people, they didn't get other jobs because they didn't want to have to miss out on the furlough payment that they were waiting on. Imagine working somewhere for 5 to 10 years and not being able to get that payout that you deserved. That's unfair, you know?
Yeah, it definitely is. And I feel as though they should have been, even if they wanted to do that, right? I feel as though they should have said, okay, we're going to
Pay them
suspend
out.
redundancy
Yeah.
payments right now. But when the country bunks back, you are required to pay these people that severance pay. I think that should have been something that was said, or even say, okay, severance pays are we can't do it right now because I think a lot of people would have left, leaving the country, leaving the businesses probably bankrupt, right? So I think that was what they were trying to avoid. But it could have been done better. I feel as though they could have said, okay, offer these people 25% pay, because like you said, it hurt the little man way more than it hurt these large corporations. And people lost their homes, lost cars, they couldn't feed their kids. And I mean, like, I felt as though it should have been thought out more, in my opinion.
I mean, working in tourism before the pandemic, a lot of people were hoping for that money. They were hoping to have it before we went into quarantine because they had no money saved up. What were they supposed to eat when they allowed us to go to the grocery stores, but no one had a job for the longest time to pay for going to the grocery store. So a lot of people just sat and starved. And I think that was the most heartbreaking, heart-wrenching part of it all.
Yeah, definitely. I remember when the pandemic first began, and I was at Kelly's, and this man, he came and he basically, we was going in the car and he told us his story and was basically saying that he was laid off, obviously because of the pandemic, and he had 4 kids and a wife, and he was the only breadwinner, and he could not afford to feed his family. And I sat there and I cried because that really hurt me. And like, he looked really genuine. Like, so we gave him some money or whatever, and hope, and he went home to feed his family, and a man had given him his breakfast. And like, to see that firsthand, to see that people were hurting in that way,
It was heart-wrenching.
so we're switching gears a little bit, and we have two guests with us today. Mr. Sidney Sinclair, who owns Down to Earth Adventure Farms, and his son, a second-generation farmer, Damani Sinclair. So, Mr. Sinclair, you told us that you started this journey about 19 years ago. What made you want to begin farming?
Well, I figure it was something that was left out. You know what I mean? Because as a small boy, I used to travel like to Andres every summer. And there was a lot of things that I'd learned from my grand aunt. It's just that the younger generation, they never had the chance to see like bread baked in the rock oven, and plenty of them don't even know what it is to go fishing. Plenty of them never really see the animals. They don't know where the food would come from. and all those different things. As a small boy coming up, right, we always used to like keep birds and all of that stuff. But how it actually happened is, and you know, I used to be in the heavy equipment business and all that, and I got injured. Took me a couple months to get better and all that, and I figured I wasn't doing the things that I needed to do. So I got back I built me a fish pond at home. I started collecting all my different parrots and birds and different plants and all that. And on Saturdays when you pass there, you'd always think I having party because all the people they bring in the kids and husband and wife and things to come and look at all the stuff that I had. So I did a proposal to the government, invited them there, and tell them if they grant me the land, I could do my own funding and I could build an adventure farm so the world could come and see.
Down to Earth Adventure Farm was an initiative my father started about 20 years ago, around the same time I was born, shortly after. So, as he said, it all started with swamp, and he filled it in. And in the first year, you know, now that we do vegetables and stuff, we were actually more interested in fruits, citrus. So we had about 5 different varieties of oranges. We had the peaches and stuff like that. But in our first year, we experienced a hurricane, and the citrus, they have an aversion for the salt water. So in our first year, around $15,000, $20,000 worth of citrus was destroyed in one hurricane, and we were never able to harvest. So after that, we had to fill in the land and actually build it a bit higher, and that's how we started getting into the vegetables. Previously, as he said, you know, we already had a passion for animals. We already had an assortment of parrots, and the initiative from the beginning was more to be educational. So we always had schools like St. John's, QC, SAC, even all the government schools too. We would bring them in, and the whole point was to educate them, to give them a lifelong experience, to actually get them into farming. So more into that, a few years later, we actually had to get more soil. We had to raise the ground about a few inches higher. We started over, and then we looked into stuff more like vegetables, more like your corns, your tomatoes, your cucumbers, and then we also planted it out with the coconut trees. Alongside that, you know, we have your beets, your carrots, all the basic vegetables, because we actually have the climate to grow just about anything here year round. You know, you just have the few things that are seasonal, like your fruits and whatnot, that they'll still grow. It's just when they bear.
How was your experience growing up on a farm?
Yeah, actually, I had a beautiful experience growing up because I actually didn't know that most people didn't know about farms and stuff. Like going to school, you know, it was sort of weird. Like people would come here and they'd have an out of body experience, you know, because everything is so large. But I grew up around it. I grew up like eating okra off a tree. I grew up picking up. I'd take a beet out of the ground. I did like an apple. So I always thought it was amazing. I thought it was spectacular that you could grow your own food. You know, that you could have animals, you feed them and everything. But the ground was already laid for me, and I felt that made it a lot easier to get into because, as you said, it's an expensive thing to get into. But genuinely, I like tending to crops. I enjoy when customers come in and I get to educate them and let them know, you know, all the different medicinal benefits of all the stuff that we grow. Stuff like the dandelion green and the endives, you know, which actually help control your blood sugar levels. Because, you know, as a Bahamas, we have a big issue with things like blood pressure. We have a problem with diabetes, obesity. And then, you know, we're able to use more natural alternatives like natural oils for bug repellent. And we just mist everything to keep it nice and healthy.
Is your produce sold in stores?
No, I sell it to the common people. Yeah, they come here and they purchase, and then on Saturdays we go to the farmers market. In fact, I'm one of them who helped started it. We started that at least about 12 years ago.
Why did you guys start the farmers market?
Well, because we was growing a lot of produce, and people was coming here, but that just was another outlet.
What are some of the challenges you face growing produce in the Bahamas?
Well, we've been through 6 hurricanes, in which Matthew was the worst, and you could have stand to the front and looked to the back.
Why should Bahamians be encouraged to grow their own food?
Well, after the pandemic, I mean, we always used to grow the seedlings and stuff, but we grew the seedlings mostly to plant in the farm, right? But after the pandemic, and then people have been to the tow line and stuff like that to try and buy food. I figured I needed to expand it and to be able to assist the people because a lot of people don't know how to grow. So I figure if I grow the seedling and I mix your soil and you follow my instructions when you take it home, then you could start growing your own stuff. Now, How I teach them to grow their garden is I let them know that they have to do it over a period of 4 weeks, right? Where you come and you get a little bit this week, and then you get a little bit the next week, and the third week. Now on the third week, you'll start to like harvest your lettuce, right? So after you start to harvest your lettuce, I really don't have to tell you nothing no more because you can be coming in here trying to see what else you can put in your garden.
Um, so we try to do our best. We try to make it accessible, with the dollar seedlings. So, I know not everybody has that expendable time or expendable money, but even if you could come in whenever you can, it's just you start with something. Once you start somewhere, some people be like, oh, if they will start their garden, they want to start everything at one time, and they're expecting this lush, beautiful thing. But everything in life takes time, and everything you do, if you just work it at a day at a time, eventually at the end you'll have a big, beautiful product. So we always encourage you to get in. When you come and get your seedlings, maybe you get one or two of the same variety. So, you don't have, if one dies, you don't have to start off from the beginning. But, come in, get maybe $4 worth, $5 worth, whatever you could do. Um, and then just begin. We have offer the pots, we offer the soil. So, get them potted, get them seeded. And from there, it's just a watering schedule, getting into a watering schedule once in the morning, once at night. You get up, you water. That's sort of like just almost like it's a lot easier than children, way easier than children. But just start watering the day, watering the night, and you just come and you keep adding, and eventually you'll start harvesting. And as they get older, it's a lot less management. They start to retain water. They don't need as much water, and you're already harvesting, so you're not going to the food store and spending as much money. And once you see that you're able to grow, which you spend so much money on, yeah, you're cutting down your own bill. So that dollar, that investment, that's worth $40, $50 you saving. Your sweet peppers, your onions, your lettuces. We literally have anything you need, even from your broccoli. We have your seasonal fruit trees, so you could actually put down trees for generations later in your yard to feed on. We got the guava, we have papayas, we have the key lime and the Persian lime. You know how expensive limes are in the store.
Do you think there is a vast difference in quality between imported produce and locally grown produce?
Yeah, much better, much better. The taste and everything is different, and then you know how you produced it.
What have you guys done to combat issues associated with the poor soil?
Well, I tell you what, right? I told you before that we actually fill this property in. So I bring in all the soil, right? I had the job to demolish the Gladstone Road chicken farm for Kingsley Edgecombe. And we brought over 100 truckloads, 20-yard truckloads of chicken manure. And then, like I say, it was in the heavy equipment, so plenty areas I had soil. So soil really wasn't a problem for me.
Do you think that Bahamian farmers can produce enough produce to feed the Bahamas?
Yeah, man. Yeah, man. Yeah, because we have the land. We have all the islands. We have the land.
Okay, so do you think that the government has done enough to help Bahamian farmers? And what initiatives do you think that they can implement that can help you guys?
I no. I think they could do a lot more. You know what I mean, to assist the farmer. Set up something. Well, they're doing it now at BAMSI, right? Training the younger people to be able to grow. But see, farming is a very expensive project. You know what I mean? Because you got to buy seeds, you got to buy irrigation system, and then like let me give you a simpler example. Your crop, they normally take like 3 months, right? So when you grow in this crop, you got workers you need to pay, right? So you calculate like the workers' time for the period of 3 months. And after you already did all those calculations, then you need to be able to produce enough seedlings to be able to pay them and to be able to make a profit.
Well, thank you guys for joining us today and letting us know a little bit about Down to Earth Farms and letting Bahamians know that it is possible to farm. And I hope that many are encouraged to visit the farm and purchase some of their $1 seedlings and to start their own gardens at home. Mrs. Sinclair mentioned BAMSI and educating the next generation to farm their own food. And our next guest is Latrey Johnson, who is a student studying agriculture at BAMSI, and he's going to speak to us about why he decided to pursue agriculture and some of its pros and cons.
My name is Latrey Johnson. I was 19 years of age when I decided to join BAMSI, and I actually joined BAMSI during the initial pandemic year. which was 2020 in August 2020. And I was sitting at home and I was thinking, what are some of the major concerns here in the Bahamas? And I looked at an article talking about food security and food shortages. And I realized that tourism, people always talk about tourism being fragile or faulty. And I was like, this is something we really should be focused on. So I did a little bit of research and I say, you know what? Agriculture is something that we are still in the rural stages and things that we need to focus on. And I said, I think it'd be an excellent idea for me to dedicate, if not all of my life, a majority of my life to education and the progression of the agricultural system here in the Bahamas. So that is how I decided to enroll in agriculture. And I said, you know what, it'd be no greater reward seeing the Bahamas progress as as one of the major agricultural forces in the Caribbean.
What advice would you give Bahamians to get into gardening in the country?
Well, the first thing I would tell them is to start small. So we always think about agriculture to just as just this whole backbreaking, boring situation or circumstance, right? However, I would suggest that number one, you make it fun. If you start off with flowers, and as we all know, flower and plants are very, very good for pollinators and to attract pollinators. So my first suggestion would be to make it fun. Don't think of it as this barn all project where I just got to plant, dirty, and maintain this. No, 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 no. Think of it actually as something that can be therapeutic. Gardening, number one, it makes you look better, right? For these beautiful flowers and bees. And even though I know a lot of people are scared of bees, they are very, very important. Think of it as a fun activity for you to do with your family, or even if you're single, you can pour some time into it when you stress. It's very therapeutic to go into the garden and watch your plants grow. Number two, it's extremely rewarding. There's nothing better than putting a seed into the ground and watch it maturate from anywhere between 60 days to 150 days. There's something very, very special and rewarding about that. It's an indescribable feeling. Thirdly, what it does, it brings education. So a lot of people have this very big misconception that garden agriculture is a poor man's business, or there's no money in agriculture. Listen, after you buy some of those supplies and pest control options, you'll be seeing like, wow, this is actually really expensive, because food and the food industry, the agriculture industry, is a very, very long chain that keeps increasing in value as it comes up to your counter. It educates you, and you realize that how much work it is done, and you get a better appreciation of farmers and all those who work inside the industry to put food on your table. And lastly, I would say is to just start small. You don't have to have this big sprawling garden with 150 grow beds, and we need all this space and water and agricultural inputs. Maybe for one season you only do, let's just say you want to start with peppers, and you start with entry level crops that only take 60 days. So you stick with your brassicas and your lettuce. If you live in an apartment like most of us do, you can grow in pots. And so you simply start off with even just one plant, one tomato, and you care for that every day. You nurture it, you treat it like a child, and you will see your love and interest starts to grow and grow and grow to a point where you're knocking down more than a sick and foxtail nursery door down to looking for more seeds, looking for more variants, and it becomes a whole educational slippery slope to the point where you even become experts and you understand how hard and rewarding the work is, to the point where now you become a quote unquote, I call it backyard garden expert.
Do you think that the government does enough in terms of promoting agriculture, the agricultural industry in the country?
Well, we recently just changed government, so obviously that kind of takes time. But for previous, I'm going from last term to the other terms. To be honest with you, no. The reason I say that is because the Bahamas imports, I think it's $1.5 billion worth of food each year. And we are in a unique situation where tourism is our major industry. So because of that, we not only have to feed our population, even though our population is relatively small, we have to feed the millions of tourists that come here each year. And the Bahamas being a tropical climate and the way I be situated, we need a lot of food. So the reason I say that they don't take it seriously is because we having the same issues that we have over and over and over again. The parking house situation, the not having their own agricultural boats, where, for, ex- for example, the produce, let's say you have tomatoes, right? Can you imagine spending tomatoes take about, let's say, 75 days? You can imagine working for 75 days. You harvested all your tomatoes. Now you're shipping them on a boat to Nassau. And they are situated right next to car parts because there's no specific agricultural boat that can be leased out by the government, which shouldn't be that hard because everybody wants governmental contracts. There's no specific agricultural boat where it's just for agricultural produce that can go back and forward and not just how you have to ship on one day. That is, I can you imagine harvesting and then have to store it and then wait. It becomes a very, very hectic system. Is what I'm saying. They have during the pandemic they did start the backyard garden initiative, which I am very very appreciative for. But there's a lot of areas where they can be improved. And one of the major areas I'd like to see improvement in that the government can assist in is farm mechanization. Now, what farm mechanization is basically farm machinery. You know, whenever you think about the farm, people think about the tractors and things like that. But if you go to the islands, um, if you're gonna order islands, I'm not including Andros in that because Andros is the agricultural hub of the Bahamas. A lot of them do not have the agricultural mechanization in order to improve their efficiency. So one of the things the government can do, and if it's in the budget, if you look at it, is purchase tractors to rent out to farmers during certain periods, their tillage season, and it makes the farming easier for the farmers, where they don't have to worry about how I'm going to till my land, how am I going to do this, and how am I going to do that, because tilling land by hand is very tedious, and is a turn off for those who are younger to get into the field because nobody wants to spend hours and hours and hours tilling away at the soil for unreasonable wages. So, with a focus and initiative on farm mechanization, that's one way, a leap forward that the government can look at in order to improving the lives of the farmers. Farming in farming in the Bahamas is like I put before, very rural, and our import bills are very high. So we talk about how the Bahamas makes a lot of money for tourism, but a lot of that is sent right back out just to feed us. And people complain about food preservatives and things like that. And anybody who grabs a banana from the food store knows it doesn't taste nearly as good as a farmer's market's banana. I'm just gonna be real honest with you. It really doesn't taste as good because it has to be shipped from wherever it comes from, and an ultra long processing period. And there's nothing that tastes better that is fresh or something that comes from a farmer's market, because sometimes they're harvested the day before and placed onto the table. There's several issues that farmers face. I already spoke about the farm mechanization and price control. They really don't have control of the price of their produce unless they do farmers market, and that is seen as very expensive. But once you go through the process and have the education, understand why they price their produce the way that they do, you would have a better understanding. If the farmer says that he wants $14 for his watermelon and it's a good sized watermelon and looks great, pay the $14 for the watermelon. And it will number one bring a smile to his face because he worked so hard just to get that $14 for that watermelon. And you getting produce that is locally grown, and I have emphasis on locally grown, and probably tastes a little bit better. But price control, farm mechanization, and then obviously the lack of support from the government are some of the things that farmers really go through when it comes to growing here in the Bahamas. Now, when it comes to Bamsi was established in 2014 by the former Christie administration, and it was developed to progress in the educational knowledge of agriculture here in the Bahamas. And Bamsi is located in Andros. And like I said, Andros is the agricultural hub of the Bahamas. So I've been a student at BAMZ for going on 2 years now. I'm in my second to last semester, and their curriculum is based off a good amount of principles that should help you to get a understanding of agriculture not only here in the Bahamas, but around the world. But most of the education and knowledge that you get is towards Bahamas because our growing situation is different than anywhere else, whether it be our alkaline soil, which is very, very unusual. A soil is more higher in alkalinity than it is in acidity or even neutrality. And whether it's our very, very short season for growing. So let's just say the Bahamian winter starts from November to April. That's not very long to grow chaos crops, or even as simple as how we monitor pest control in a situation we call IPMs. And I must say, the most important parts of BAMSI and the one that I appreciate are the lecturers. I don't think you would ever find more dedicated lecturers than the ones at BAMSI. Particularly, I could only speak for those in our cultural field, but I must say that they are number one, educated, number two, dedicated, and number three, compassionate.
What do you think are some of the problems in the country when it comes to making agriculture an industry, or what some of the challenges?
So one of the challenges I would think is that the lack of incentivization programs for farmers or overall knowledge. Starting up a farm here in the Bahamas is a very, very daunting task because you need to survey your land preparation and all those other stuff. And if you don't have the startup cost for farming is extremely high. And the upfront cost, and that what puts a lot of people off from going into farming. So I think incentivization programs by the government and more overall funding is one of the solutions here because it is possible, even if it's only possible to feed all of the Bahamian citizens, and then maybe up to a certain percentage of the tourists based off of their pallets, of course, it is possible. And growing to export is one of the things that we can accomplish because of our climate here in the Bahamas. Even though we have a shorter growing season for cool weather crops, our environment is very, very favorable for cash crops like sugarcane. And for those of you who don't know, Cuba, when underneath Fidel Castro, they wanted to he wanted to mass export sugarcane and obviously the Cuban cigars. And we are right inside the same zone, even though we don't sell cocoa because we are very, very flat. Um, that is something we can look at. And any for those of us who partake in the alcoholic beverages, we all know that sugar is a very, very big part of that process. So I think the lack of government incentivization programs is what really hampers our culture here because the Bahamas tends to focus on tourism because it's a major industry and it quote unquote pays all the bills. But a country can't feed himself a slave to others. That's like how I love to put it. And and another unique issue, so something that people don't particularly think about is the Bahamian palate. Now, if I was to ask anybody randomly, what Bahamians eat a lot of is rice, which is crazy, but they do they do eat a lot of cabbage and other vegetables like that. So that's something we'd have to look at is how can we farm within our climate the things that Bahamian consumers love to eat. based on their pallets, which is something that we have to look at for small ruminations, and poultry farming is something that can also be studied in Bible because poultry, there are poultry breeds that can survive the Bahamian weathering system and can be used as either broilers or layers. And it is something, it is actually something that the government can do, especially when it comes to our food. I know this topic was on food security and increasing food security here in the Bahamas and how that works when it comes to poultry production and overall farming in general. There needs to be more, I wouldn't say regulations, but more accountability because a lot of Bahamians don't actually know where their food comes from. But hey, that's not either here nor there. So my main thing again, as I keep alluding to, is because we are not on the scale of places like China, who's been doing this for years, and America. I think the government should step in and have more sanctification programs, educational programs. And what I mean incentivization, I mean agricultural inputs, and especially for startup farmers. So agricultural inputs are the most one of the most expensive parts of your operations. And agricultural inputs contain things like fertilizers, pesticides, and food and seeds and seedling trays in general. That's a blanket term for agricultural inputs. So, and last but certainly not least, misinformation. That is something that holds back agriculture a lot, is misinformation. In general, the agriculture as a science is probably one of the most misunderstood branches here in the Bahamas. You know, people just say, "Oh, grow me an apple," or "Oh, it's agriculture just throwing out a seed and playing in dirt and if a ball." But no. Agriculture. What's funny is agriculture was the first job given to Adam after he skipped out of the garden. But hey, I guess, I guess it's only for people like Adam. But misinformation, I think we need to inform Bahamians of number one, the severity of the situation, number two, the possible solutions, and number three, what they can do to assist. And community smart agriculture is one of those things that can help. Um, what community smart agriculture basically is buying shares on a farm before the season starts and receiving your produce on a bi-weekly or monthly or however the farmer and you decide basis. So basically, Shanae, you could say, Latre, I want, before the cabbage season start, each month I want 50 pounds of cabbage because I want to make sauerkraut for my hot dog stand. I say, okay, you purchase the shares beforehand. I know how much I produce it for. And I say, instead of worrying about, I got to sell it to the farmer's market or I don't have contracts. You can say, okay, Shanae, I get you 50 pounds of cabbage at the end of, it takes 2 months on average. I'll have you at the end of November. Come, I will deliver your packages to your door. And that guarantees money in the farmer's hand, and it guarantees you that if you have a big family or family planning, you can say, you know what, let me get these cabbages in bulk, and you'll probably get it at a better price than buying it from the store. That is just a small thing that they can look at in order to improve agriculture here in the Bahamas. Just a small.
Talking about the expense of food, the other day I went in the store and like, if when stores cut up the fruits for you, a
Uh-huh.
small one of those is $6 of
Mm-hmm.
cut up fruit. And I feel like that's expensive, and people complain about going to the farmer's market, but when I went to the farmer's market, I got sweet potato for $1.50 per pound. And
Yeah, exactly.
I didn't think that was expensive. But the government isn't necessarily pushing the issue because as simple as mattresses, you cannot import. I mean, you could import mattresses, but you're gonna pay a lot of duty on them simply because we produce them here.
forty
So if
percent
we, I think it's more than that. So if we produce food, like for instance, let's say Bahamas produce a lot of, I don't know what we produce a lot of, but let's
Onions.
say potato, okay, onions. We produce a lot of onions. Why is it that large corporations that super value, cost right, budget, extra value, why are they allowed to bring in onions if we have farmers right here who are selling it? I feel like they should only be allowed to bring in whatever is not like, for instance, if they need 500 pounds, but the Bahamas only produces 300, then they should be able to bring in the excess 200, but not the full 500, because you're disadvantaging Bahamians, and it makes no sense, at least to me. So I feel like in that way the government should step in. On top of what you talked about with the funding and the program, like, I just
Right.
feel like more could be done in that aspect. Thank you, Latre, for sharing your insights and experiences with us. We hope that you guys enjoyed this episode of Candid on Farming, and see you guys next week. So you can follow us on social media on Instagram and Facebook at Candid242. Keep it real, Bahamas.